If you were just 3 weeks away from your wedding, could you imagine vanishing completely without leaving a single trace? And if the last person suspected took their secrets to the grave, would you still believe the truth could ever be found? Nikki McCowian, 28 years old, a corrections officer in Indiana, mysteriously disappeared just 3 weeks before her wedding. The last time she was seen, she was at a laundromat and a convenience store. The investigation soon turned toward 3 men she knew, one of them, her co-worker Tommy Swint. Years later, Swint would be linked to another murder case, and then he died before police could arrest him, leaving behind a mystery that still has no answers. There are stories that make me believe happiness can sometimes be nothing more than a thin curtain hiding a storm that's about to hit. Imagine this just 3 weeks away from your wedding, the day you've been waiting for your whole life. The dress is chosen, the reception is planned, friends and family are counting down the days. Everything seems set for a perfect ending. And then, on an ordinary afternoon, the bride-to-be vanishes. No note, no trace, no explanation. A love story suddenly turns into a cold mystery, and those left behind are thrown into a search filled with confusion, suspicion, and fear. Welcome to Crime Scene Report. I'll take you through every detail of this case, not just telling the story, but analyzing it, breaking it down, and asking the questions you may have never heard anyone ask. If you believe stories like this need to be told, so the truth isn't forgotten, hit that subscribe button. It's how you give us the strength to keep bringing you the most honest, detailed, and high-quality videos possible. The disappearance of Nikki McCowian is one of those cases that haunts me because of how ordinary it seemed in those final moments. Nikki, 28 years old, on the brink of marriage, showed no signs of major conflict, no complaints about her life, yet vanished on what looked like a peaceful Sunday. What stood out to me were the details of her last hours. Those small, everyday actions that in hindsight felt like puzzle pieces, right before the picture fell into darkness. That day, Nikki did what she always did. She took her laundry to a laundromat in Richmond, Indiana, then stopped by a convenience store in Dayton, Ohio to pick up a few things. Security cameras captured her smiling at the counter, carrying her bags out the door. No one knew it would be the last time she was ever seen. She told her family she'd be back at her sister's house right after picking up her clothes, but she never returned. At first, her family tried to reassure themselves. Maybe she was just out shopping or meeting friends, but as her phone stayed silent and the hours passed, the worry began to build. By that evening, when Nikki didn't show up to pick up her daughter, something she had never once failed to do, everyone knew. This wasn't something small. They started making calls, searching, contacting hospitals. Her purse and ID were still at home. Every sign pointed to the fact Nikki had made no plans to be gone for long. Someone once asked me, was she just trying to escape the pressure of getting married? But according to her family and friends, Nikki was excited for the wedding. There were no signs she wanted to run away or change her mind. In fact, everything she did that day, doing laundry, stopping by the store, was part of her normal routine. It made me think, sometimes the days that seem the most peaceful can hide the greatest danger. Nikki was in what many would call the best stage of her life, but that was also when she was most vulnerable. Maybe she crossed paths with someone unexpectedly, or stepped into a situation she never saw coming. From the moment Nikki disappeared, every relationship around her was examined under a microscope. Every action, every word. Anyone could be a link, big or small, in this story. For me, that was when truth and assumption began to split apart. Some details sounded random at first, but when pieced together, they became bright points guiding the investigation. Others seemed important, but led straight into dead ends. Nikki's disappearance isn't just the story of a missing woman. It's a reminder that any moment in life, no matter how ordinary, can become the start of a mystery, one that may never be solved. And that's why today, I want to take you through every trace. From the last image on camera to the last people who saw her, because only by putting the pieces together Can we get closer to the answer her family has waited for nearly 2 decades? And to find that answer, the investigation began by narrowing in on the people closest to Nikki, those who seemed like they could only bring her happiness, but who soon became the focus of suspicion. When someone goes missing, especially when they're happy and about to get married, the circle of suspicion almost always starts with those closest to them. Nikki's case was no exception. From the very beginning, police focused on 3 names, 3 relationships that might hold the key to the truth. But the deeper I looked, the more I realized this web wasn't just about finding someone with a motive. It was a chain of leads, each one pulling the investigation in a different direction, and most of them leading straight into dead ends. The first person in the crosshairs was Bobby Webster, her fiancé. They'd fallen in love in high school, broken up, then reunited and planned to marry. But just days after Nikki disappeared, Bobby started doing things that left people baffled, canceling the wedding venue, trying to return the ring, even asking about getting back Nikki's tuition money. When he took a polygraph, the results showed signs of deception. For a man who had just lost his fiancée, these actions were hard to explain. But what struck me was, police couldn't find a single piece of physical evidence to charge Bobby. He might have acted suspicious, but suspicion is very different from proof. Next was Stephen Johnston, Nikki's ex-boyfriend, and the father of her daughter. Their connection wasn't just in the past. It was ongoing through their shared responsibility for the child. When Nikki's car was found in a parking lot at the apartment complex where Stephen lived, I thought this was the turning point. But Stephen fully cooperated. He agreed to a polygraph and passed. There were no signs of evasion, no conflicting statements. What seemed like a clear lead suddenly went nowhere, leaving both the family and investigators disappointed. And then came the third name, Tommy Swint, bringing a sense of unease from the start. Tommy was Nikki's co-worker at a correctional facility in Dayton, Ohio. According to her friends and family, he gave her attention far beyond what was normal. Some would call it an obsession. It became impossible to ignore when at Nikki's bridal shower, Tommy sent her lingerie a gift that was not only inappropriate, but carried heavy implications. He didn't show up in person, but sending that kind of gift revealed a relationship that had crossed the line from co-worker to something much more personal. Police did speak to Tommy, but according to the case files, he never fully cooperated. His answers were vague, avoiding the core of the questions, sometimes steering the conversation in another direction. To investigators, it felt like he had something to hide. But once again, there was no concrete evidence. Tommy remained a person of interest, but there was nothing they could charge him with. Time passed, the case stalled. Until 6 years later, an unexpected piece of information surfaced. Tommy Swint had become a police officer in Trotwood, Ohio. What sparked controversy was the fact he never told his department he had once been a suspect in Nikki's disappearance. That brought his name back into the case file, this time with a completely new connection. An anonymous tip came into Dayton police, urging them to look at Tommy in connection with a 1991 murder, the killing of Tina Ivory. She had been strangled, wrapped in a blanket, and dumped at a landfill. DNA and fingerprints from the scene matched Tommy exactly. To me, this was no longer some strange coincidence. It was a clear signal a man who had been near Nikki when she vanished was directly linked to a brutal murder years earlier. This connection didn't directly answer the question, where is Nikki? But it turned Tommy from a faded name into the center of suspicion. Police believed if they could arrest him, they might learn more about Nikki. But before that plan could be carried out, Tommy was dead. His sudden death without explanation ended any chance of hearing the truth from his own mouth. Looking back over this web of suspicion, I see one thing clearly. Each person had something that made them suspicious, and each had something that kept them from being charged. Bobby's behavior was hard to explain, but there was no evidence. Stephen's connection to the location was compelling, but he passed the tests. Tommy had a troubling personal history and was tied to a murder, but his death closed the door on questioning him. For me, this was when the investigation felt most tense, when all 3 main candidates could not be ruled out, but none could be charged. Each time a new lead appeared, hope would flare only to be extinguished when it hit a dead end. It's the kind of exhausting cycle that only the families of victims truly understand. The web of suspicion in Nikki's case wasn't just a list of names. It was a story woven from emotion, responsibility, and secrets. It showed how the people closest to someone can become the very center of doubt. And it reminded me that in criminal investigations, following the trail isn't just about finding out who did something, it's also about understanding why those clues exist in the first place. Tommy was no longer just a faded name in a file, but before the truth could surface, he was dead, taking with him secrets that might have been the key to Nikki's disappearance. And that's when the story shifted into a new chapter where hope and despair intertwined. When the name Tommy Swint came back into Nikki's case file, I thought for the first time in years, police finally had a real chance at the truth. DNA and fingerprints linked Tommy directly to the 1991 murder of Tina Ivory, from someone merely possibly connected to Nikki's disappearance. He was now tied to a violent crime backed by scientific evidence. For investigators, this could be the key to unlocking a door that had been sealed for years. 3 agencies in Indiana, Ohio, and Alabama quickly joined forces to arrest Tommy. The plan was clear. Once in custody, they'd question him about Tina and use the opportunity to ask about Nikki. Many believed that if Tommy talked, critical answers would surface. But when Alabama officers approached the place where Tommy lived and worked as a security guard, a gunshot rang out before they could reach the door. Tommy Swint had taken his own life. That single shot ended the life of a suspect, and with it, the hope of ever questioning him about Nikki. For Nikki's family, it was a mix of shock, frustration, and anger. They had waited over 6 years for this moment, and in an instant the door slammed shut. For Tina Ivory's loved ones, there was some relief. Their case now had direction. But for Nikki's side, they were back to square one. No idea where she was. No answers about what happened that day. Police didn't believe the secrets died with Tommy. They learned he had once been romantically involved with a female co-worker at the same jail where Nikki worked. Investigators suspected she knew more than she had said. To this day, there's been no public confirmation that she ever shared information strong enough to crack the case. That silence has only deepened the mystery. Looking back, I feel nothing but regret. We came so close to the truth, only to be pushed back into the dark. Tommy's death didn't just remove a suspect. It erased the chance to confirm or dismiss key theories. In long-term missing persons cases, every living witness, every living suspect is a precious source of information. And when they're gone, so is the opportunity. But police haven't given up. They believe someone out there still knows the truth. It could be an old witness, someone who once heard Tommy talk, or even a person who's never appeared in the case files at all. To me, Nikki's case isn't just about a woman who vanished, and a suspect who took his secrets to the grave. It's a reminder of how fragile justice can be, when it depends on timing and people. One different turn if Tommy had been arrested alive, or if a witness had spoken up, and the outcome might have been completely different. Nearly 2 decades have passed. Nikki's daughter, only 9 years old when her mother disappeared, is now grown and has a family of her own. But during every milestone, her mother's absence is still there. Bobby Webster, the fiancé from all those years ago, still lives alone, still waiting for an answer. Police continue to urge anyone with information to come forward. They believe that sometimes a single small detail, a memory that seems unimportant, could be the key. And I believe that if that day comes, it won't just bring closure to Nikki's family, it will finally close a haunting chapter in America's true crime history. For now, the door to Nikki's case remains shut, but I believe the truth can be buried and still never disappear. The real question is, who will have the courage to dig it up, and when they do, will we be ready to hear it? As I close this story, what stays with me is not just an unsolved disappearance, but the feeling of an unfillable void, a void of truth left unrevealed, and people still waiting for answers. I've realized Sometimes it's not the death or the sudden loss that wears people down. It's the long, drawn-out uncertainty when you don't know whether to keep hoping or finally let go. Nikki's case makes me think about the value of noticing and acting in time. In everyday life, there are small, fleeting signs of trouble we might ignore because we think it's not my business. But those tiny details, if noticed and shared at the right moment, could save someone from vanishing or spare a family from years of waiting in despair. That's a lesson not just for criminal cases, but for every relationship in our lives. Never ignore a cry for help, no matter how small it seems. So let me ask you, if you ever had information or even a suspicion about something serious, would you stay silent to avoid trouble, or would you speak up to find the truth? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you believe stories like this should be told, so the truth is never forgotten, hit subscribe to Crime Scene Report. Your support is what drives us to keep bringing you honest, in-depth, and complete stories in every video to come.